Welcome to Historic Richland Church. You're standing at the 1844 edifice of the church, the Greek Revival style of church. About 2 miles in front of where I stand was the original church called the Richland Creek Baptist Church of Christ Meeting House. It was an old log structure built on the Richland Creek. In 1811, Micajah Fulgham, who was the first pastor of the church, chose to plant it there along with those believers. Inside, in just a moment, you'll see some documentation back to 1812, the actual records that were kept of the church. This particular style was in vogue in 1844 through 1850, and it was built here in this wonderful area of Twiggs County by William Sessions, who was the architect. He also built another home here, a plantation home over off Highway 96. We're now in the interior of the church, and as we go through, I want you to note the particular parts of the architecture that are still important parts that we see in many of the buildings of this era. The plaster walls, the beautiful round areas of the plaster, the beautiful old heart pine floors, the pews that you see. How many hands have walked down these aisles in victory? How many hands have touched these in mourning? How many faithful people walked through these doors? This door that we just entered was the door designated for the male members of the church. The female members entered through the opposite side. And even on the outside of those were servants' entrances. And the females on their respective side, the men on this side. Inside the church, and as you glance around as we continue on the tour, I want to point out several things to you, that most of this is original architecture and original structure. The church was disbanded in 1911. The doors were closed. And since that time, they have been turned over to the Richland Restoration League, and the league has done a wonderful job in continuing to preserve and to maintain this particular facility for future generations. Let's go on down the aisle some. Another thing that's original, but they're not the original things, but in the ceiling you'll notice these are lights that were here. They burned lamp oil or whale oil, and this is the closest thing that we can come to finding the particular lighting that was held for the church. These are the closest that you could get. Of course, they've been electrified today. Not a whole lot of church was held at night. Most of it was during the day because people had lots of trouble getting to and from church, generally by wagon or by horseback, and so there wasn't a whole lot of evening travel. Another point that I'd like to feature is the center dividing wall right down the center of the church. Now then, the men sitting on this side, the women sitting on the opposite side. I believe if I was a young man and I was interested in a young filly who had caught my eye, and she happened to sit right about there, that I would plop myself down right about here so that I could be as close and still hear the sermon and still fall under the edicts of the church and to be able to communicate with this young thing on the opposite side. Okay, we're at the front of the church now. The particulars that you'll see, and I want to point out some of the specific things that were here for the beginning of the church. This particular wood stove to my right is a wood stove built in 1853 from a foundry, the North Chase and North Company in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Some years ago, vandals broke in and destroyed both of the stoves, but this particular unit is one that's been restored and put back into the original location that it sat in the church. The other one is upstairs as a testimony to vandalism and to the vengeful acts that the Spirit can bring onto a church and onto the body. To my left is a piano from 1860s. It replaces a piano that got lost from here. But this particular piano was a gift just recently in 2007. The original piano came from Boston. It was a Chickering piano, and it came across the Atlantic down to Savannah. Mr. Shine was buying a piano for his daughter, his teenage daughter, and he owned an ox cart company. And the piano that came to Twiggs County was carried by ox cart from Savannah. They didn't have any interstates. They didn't have the roadways that we know today. So that was quite a bumpy ride for that particular instrument. When it came and it sat here in the church, I think about 1956, when it was made a donation and a present to the church. This is a beautiful copy of the same piano that was here. This one was built in the 1860s. The other was from 1850s. The Cannonball House in Macon has loaned us this beautiful gown. The gown is a mourning gown. It was made in 1850. It also is made of silk and jet glass beads. A woman and her attire was specific for a mourning period during the Victorian era. Men had shorter mourning and children had shorter mournings than the ladies. We're here in the front of the church now, the pulpit area. In this particular area, there's a display. What you see is a pulpit of the Gothic period from about 1840. It is not original to the church, nor is the standing altar behind the pulpit. The thing that is significant in the church today is a silver service that was presented in 1859. It's a communion service that consists of the master flagon, the master bowl for the sacramental bread, 2 service plates, and 2 chalices. They are all original to the church, and they are presented at homecoming time, at anniversary time, and for special occasions. Other significant things that you see here on the table represent the time when people would come to church and pay their offering, pay their tithe. During the time of the 1840s, 1860s, 67 cents was the average weekly wage that an earner would use or would earn by working in a mill. 10% of that would work out to about 7 cents. And what you see are 7 large braided hair Liberty coins, and they represent 7 cents, or the 10% of the weekly wage. The bag is a bag that was used to take up the offering. And it took everybody being devoted and dedicated to be able to make the church function as it does today. And that's why we have this preservation project, so that we can continue to help this church to function. Of special note here in the glass case is the cluster of spiritual hymns and sacred songs by Jesse Mercer from 1829. Jesse Mercer was the founder of Mercer University. It's not a coincidence that 5 years later, in 1834, this particular church was used and he was the moderator for the Georgia Baptist Convention who met here in this particular church. Of course, we know him as the founder of Mercer University today, and this book is very valuable to the collection that's been on loan to the church. We also have the original documents, the original books of minutes of the church from 1812 through 1844, I think it is. There's a collection of books, of hymns, of scriptures, and of Bibles. Many, many different Bibles, many different versions, just as today, were carried and used throughout the time of this particular church. We're upstairs in the servants' gallery. In front of me and behind me are the particular pews that were left up here. Of course, the men sat on one side, and the women, again, sat on the other side. From my viewpoint and my advantage, I love looking down on the congregation from up here. There's something spiritual about standing in this particular part of the building for me, and particularly. To my left is a sad reminder of the acts of vandalism to this church. This is the original organ that was paid off in December 1st, 1890. And they were so pleased, and they wrote it in all their documents. We've paid off the organ, and now it sits in complete disrepair, as does the other stove. The women of the church, led by Isoline Wimberly, would gather together. In June of 1861, Ms. Wimberly presented a flag to the 6th Georgia Regiment, Company I. The regiment was made up of men from Twiggs County and surrounding counties. They were known as the Twiggs Guard. What you have over here to my left is a flag that was created by the women of the church. The pictured image is the original flag that resides now in the state capitol flag collection. The copy is one made by my wife. It's all made by hand, and it's a true facsimile of the actual flag that was presented. The ladies also made many other things. They would meet to roll muslin bandages to be able to send to the front so that the surgeons might be able to use them and protect some of their own boys. Actually, one of the surgeons for the Confederacy was Thomas Abner Warren, and he is also the color bearer who received the flag on the very steps of this church. He went in and immediately became an assistant surgeon, and at the end of the war was a surgeon for sure. He had learned his art during that 4-year period. The ladies made comfort bags, and that's what's displayed here. The comfort bag was like a care package. Even back as far as the war between the states, the women were sending things of comfort, socks or towels or soap made of lye and tallow or beeswax, anything that might comfort a soldier. Maybe a picture from home or beeswax candles. Maybe a package of matches called lucifers. Maybe the simple piece of cloth that they could use to patch their garment. Whatever it was, Richland Church was formative and prepared to send for our boys. Might even send a picture of mom or dad, or maybe a picture of that significant person in their life if they knew it was going to a specific regiment. So, even today, after 1811, through the closing of the church in 1911, it's 2007, and the church still stands. Why does the church stand? This is just the building. It's because someone who has the church inside them gave that this might continue to be productive. Help us preserve this building, this foundation of Christianity, and we'll thank you for all that you've done.